Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band podcast. I'm your host, Benedictine, and I'm here with my friend and co-host, Malcolm Owen Flood. Hello, Malcolm. How are you? Good to see you again.
Hey, Benny. I'm doing great, man. It's great to see you as well. It feels like it's been a couple weeks, has it been, since we've gotten to catch up? Yeah, busy times, but very fantastic to see you. And dude, you got to see this, actually. Check this out. People that are just listening, I am holding up faders.
Ooh,
Control
what do you have there?
Faders. It is the Icon Platform M+. So I got 8 faders on there and yada yada. I use it I got it for my cart for doing like location sound stuff, mixing on set. But I then was mixing a song last week and was like, well, why don't I bring it in, connect it to Pro Tools, and I'll have some faders for Pro Tools as well, and it'll be super fun.
And is it fun?
Well, I thought you would love that I was doing that because you made that switch and loved it. But here's the downturn of the story is it wasn't working, so I decided to update the firmware. And something went wrong with like the power through USB while updating, and the update failed, and it seems like I've bricked the unit. Like it seems like it's totally broken, which is very upsetting, actually.
You can't use it live too now? So,
no, it just straight up doesn't work right now. So I'm kind of in the midst of support. And like they're really quick to get back to me. I've got an email sitting in my inbox right now, so I'm kind of yet to read it. But from what I found online, if that happens, it might just be toast, which is pretty sad because it worked perfully for my location stuff.
Was it your fault though, or is it like can you get a replacement?
No, it just failed, and then something went wrong. So I don't think it was my fault.
So they gotta send you a new one, basically.
I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. Send Malcolm a new one. Definitely.
I'm not blaming them yet, but we'll see what we can do. Maybe there's like a factory reset I don't know how to do. But I really want to use it with Pro Tools. I think that'd be so fun. I was balancing a bunch of guitars and I was like, this would be so much easier.
Yeah. Dude, like I had that happen with an interface once. I won't say the name of the company, but it happened and it got stuck during like a firmware update, and I could never get it to work after that again.
Oh my gosh. I don't know enough about how software and hardware works, but I just don't get how you can't just be like, you know, how like old Game Boys had a little reset button or something. You just hold that and it goes back to how you got it. It makes sense to me.
Totally. That's the way it should. That's the way it should be. Yes. But like, yeah, I don't know. I think they will send you a new one that if it's not your fault.
We'll see. But in the meantime, my studio looks pretty cool. I like having the faders sitting there.
Yeah, me too. Like I did a little sort of, not revamp, but I've reorganized things a little bit too this week. So I got the controller slightly on the left now because, I just rearranged things a little bit and got the Stream Deck in front of me and a little additional mic that I was connected to my phone because soon I'm going to be experimenting with a second camera from the side for some things. And I have the mic there and like all these things. And I spent way too much money for a rack mount for my monitor controller that used to be here. That's now in the rack next to me. But I'm so happy that I spent it because like, just looks so much better in the rec, and I just love when things are like organized. So awesome. I did a little bit of that too. Yeah, but the controller, I can't wait for you to be able to use it because I think it is really cool. And I sort of went back and forth on controllers, but I really think it's better to have one.
I think I'm like really just looking at it for the faders. So the rest of it is not necessary.
And transport,
I shortcut.
Find that to be pretty cool too. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I could see that for sure.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, I'll report once I actually manage to get it working. I'll definitely report back and let you know how I like it and whatnot. So stay tuned.
Yeah, totally. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, I just noticed that my lights behind me are kind of weird blue and red, which was not intentional. Like I think one of them might be on like sound detection or something because it used to be all red and now one of them turned blue. Let's see what happens during the episode. Looks like I'm having a police car back there or something.
Here's a fun fact. I am mildly color deficient, and I see very purple lights behind you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Both of them the same?
I don't know if I have. Let me go full screen here and see how much I can
one of them
see.
is red and one is blue.
Oh, yeah. The red is pretty much pink to me, and then so over your right shoulder is pink, and then over I guess they're both over your right shoulder, but the one closer to you is very purple to me.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah. No, they're blue and red. At least maybe I don't see them correctly.
You're definitely right. This happens all the time.
All right, let's see. Maybe they changed during the episode. Got to do something about that. Anyway, let's get to today's episode. This time we're talking about sibilance. We're talking about S's, sibilant noises in vocals. Particularly, we're talking about how to control them. So it's about de-essing, sibilance control, but not just using de-essers, but how to get rid of or how to control sibilance in vocals in general. Because I think, and most people would agree, I think, or I hope so, that sibilance needs to be sort of controlled. Like it shouldn't be all over the place and annoying and piercing. So, and I also think that overly sibilant vocals, especially, are a problem in a lot of DIY recordings and many DIY recordings. Sometimes it's also the cymbals and other stuff, but like especially in the vocals, I hear it a lot. And there's multiple reasons for that, and we're going to get to that. So we're going to talk about how to deal with that, how to avoid it in the first place, or reduce the sibilant stuff.
Yep.
You can't really avoid it, but like control it. And then we also going to talk about things you can do after the fact. So the part of it is like capturing it ideal, and then the other part is like what you can do after the recording to keep it in check and to make sure that it's not piercing and annoying to listen to.
Yeah.
And there's multiple ways to do that. And I think it's really an important topic that we haven't really talked about, because I hear it all the time where you almost can't listen to the song if it's like really bad because it's so distracting. At least to me, I hate that stuff. It's also, by the way, on some podcasts. I don't know about our podcast. Maybe we're too sibilant too. I don't know, because it's fairly bright, but there's a lot of podcasts and audiobooks that I've listened to where I could barely focus on the content just because it's like
sometimes it's
S's
so bad.
all over the place.
Yeah. But, so all humans kind of have this shared ability to know what a voice should sound like. And as soon as that is messed with too much, the whole recording's kind of scrapped. I mean, there's exceptions, like there's certain sounds we like, really slap back, echo heavy vocals have been a sound over the ages and stuff like that. But there's something about the quality of the voice where if it's like recorded in a way that seems phasey or something, or it's EQ'd too harsh or like scooped out and hollow, we just instantly can tell that it's not right. And everybody can do that because we're so used to hearing people talk. That's how we communicate. So S's are something that in real life, this doesn't happen. It doesn't sound weird. S's sound totally normal in real life. But when we're recording them and we're compressing signals and even or saturating and whatnot, they become more of an issue, and it's something we need to combat to make it normal again. We need to make it natural and what we expect to hear from a human voice. And it, as Benny said, it's not something you can avoid. It will happen. So it's learning how to deal with it and training your ear to look for it as well, I think.
Yes, absolutely. That's actually interesting. I don't know when it happened, but I remember that like years ago, I didn't ever think about this. I was just listening to stuff and I never thought about this is sibilant or the S's are painful or whatever. But at some point I started to notice that in other recordings and like, as I said, podcasts and stuff. And I feel like it got worse over the years. So it didn't get worse in the recordings, but my perception of it and how much it annoys me got worse. So there's definitely something to be said about developing your hearing. And now you could say that, well, if like normal people, sort of non-music pros, if they don't hear it as well, why should we worry about this? But I think that even if you can't put your finger on it, and if you don't really hear it the way we hear it, it's still distracting and it's still a problem.
No. So if you can't tell it's an S, you'll still think it sounds weird. I'm convinced that you'll be like, something's wrong with this vocal. I don't like it very much. And it might be that it's the S. It might be something else, It could be like an overly crazy proximity effect or something like, but if it's just not right, it's kind of universal for humans, I think. Now, the same is true if you, like Benny and I, hate S's. It's really easy to just overkill them, and make them like just disappear altogether. And that sounds very wrong as well. So it is a fine line of getting this right. But I mean, it's really not that hard. I don't want to make it sound hard, but there is kind of multiple ways to get there. And sometimes it's not as straightforward as you might have 10 mixes where it's as easy as just opening up your default De-Esser plugin and you're good. But and then the 11th mix, it takes you an hour.
Yeah, totally. And the thing is, sometimes when the recording is really bad, and you sometimes have to decide if you want to keep it like the bad harsh S's or you want to do something about them. But then sometimes that can't be done really transparently, and so you end up getting like a lisp or like just weird sounding S's. And there's always this like if it's just recorded badly, there's often this weird trade-off where it's not good if you don't do anything about it, but if you treat it, it's also not really good. So there's really, you got to capture it well, I think. And I have some favorite records of mine, actually. So some punk records are out there where I don't know what happened to the recording, but I just know that they de-essed it so much that it sounds like the singer has a lisp, and that's just as annoying to me. So yeah, you can definitely overdo it on in the processing too. But maybe the recordings were so bad that this was still better than the original. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's really hard to tame that stuff sometimes. But usually there is a way because you have multiple options of dealing with it, and we're going to talk about those.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Now let's start with the tracking. Actually, I think the biggest one to me, and that's kind of also hard to do for a lot of people if you don't have a mic locker full of different mics. But mic choice is where it starts for me, because some mics, even like very expensive, great mics, just don't work for certain people. That's just a fact. And I'm talking into this modeling mic right now that has a virtual sort of mic locker that you can use and like do a shootout in the computer, which is very convenient. And when I go through the different models in there, and I have no idea how close they sound to some of the real things, at least the ones that I haven't heard yet in real life or haven't used. I have no idea how close they are, but I can hear that they are very different, especially when it comes to the sibilants. And some work super well on one singer, and like for a different singer, it doesn't work at all. And the other mics that I have owned when I was still producing and recording, I would always do shootouts, or I had some go-tos that I knew for certain types of vocals it might be a good choice, but I had to always try, because what worked for one person did not necessarily work for a different person. So I think mic choice is a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have that luxury, we realize, being DIY home recorders, you might kind of have invested into one solid all-round mic, and in which case, yeah, make it work. It's not going to break you. If you've got a decent vocal mic, you're going to be able to make this work. But if you do have a couple options, it's totally worth shooting out and seeing which one complements your vocalist the best.
Yeah. Which it's worth mentioning here that if you followed our advice that we gave multiple times on this podcast, and you got yourself a dynamic mic for vocals, if you're tracking at home, like an SM7 or the Procaster, the Rode, or some large diaphragm dynamic mic, like the typical voiceover mics, these, I think, are not very problematic when it comes to S's, and they are very versatile. They work on a lot of people, and I can't remember having a session being in a session with an SM7 and like having weird S's or something like that was never a problem.
Very smooth.
Yeah, it's mostly the cheap condenser microphones that have this problem often, where they try to sound like hyped and expensive, but what they really do is just make things harsh and sibilant.
Yes. Looking at you, Rode NT1.
Yeah.
Or NTG1, I can't remember what the model is.
Yeah, NT1. The one, yeah. When in doubt, I'd say you can even use, but not even use, you can absolutely use an SM57 or something even, or an SM58 or some other dynamic mic. Like, you can do a shootout with all kinds of mics that you have, as long as they're not super EQ'd. There are special things like kick drum mics and stuff, but like the typical instrument mics that you have lying around, they could work for vocals. And when your only options are a cheap condenser mic and maybe a 57, I'd compare it against the 57, and maybe that's the better choice.
Totally. Yeah, definitely give it a shot. You never know. Now, choosing the mic, yeah, if you can get that right, fantastic. If you only have the one, you got to make it work. There's still some stuff you can do. The first thing I would mention would just be placement. And it's not uncommon to experiment with your access on the microphone for plosives and S noises. I find that if you just sing a little off access on hard plosives or hard consonances, it really smooths things out. That the S's get better. I wonder, with the dynamic, I'm not sure it's going to make much of a difference, but we could do a little test. Snake, that was on access. Snake, that was off access.
Yeah.
We'll see if it sounds different.
There was a difference too. I can do that too. That's what I'm doing all the time here. I have the mic slightly from the side and I'm talking straight ahead, which is like I'm not talking into the diaphragm directly. That's why I don't even have a pop filter on my condenser mic here, because it just works the way it does.
So brave.
But if I'm talking straight into it, it's going to sound differently. And snake. These were two different directions that I was talking to right now. And yeah, you can totally do that. The biggest thing for me when it comes to access, when it comes to placement, is when you make an S noise, typically air goes from the top of your mouth downwards, basically. The airflow goes down. And you can even feel that when you make an S noise. You feel it on the lower lip, typically.
Oh, yeah.
And yep.
This is fun. I could just picture all of our listeners going...
Yeah.
driving around in the cars.
Exactly. So that means if you have the mic coming from below, like you have now, Malcolm,
yep,
that will Yep, that is likely to increase the sibilance and cause more problems. It doesn't have to, but can. And if you're coming from above, then the airflow goes below the mic, and it oftentimes works better for me with S's. Also with plosives, like that stuff sort of tends to go down. And if you're coming from slightly above, and don't do the Lemmy thing, like don't sing upwards, like just point the mic, like have the mic a little higher, point it down at your mouth, but sing straight ahead. That can solve that issue.
Everybody's probably seen pictures of the upside down mic, like a tube mic hung upside down, and that's some people
Different
say
reason for that though.
Yeah, for the tube heat is one thing, but I actually do find if you're trying to get this above the singer a little bit, it looks to their eye like it's kind of in a more centered spot, so they don't tilt their head as much. Where if you have it in its usual orientation and you raise it up high, they tilt their head to follow it. So it kind of tricks them into singing straight without manipulating their neck too much.
Totally. Yeah, I haven't thought about that, but that's totally true. And also might get the mic out of the way when they have to look at lyrics or something.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
So
at the same time, I have an irrational fear of it. It just looks like the mic's going to fall out of the stand and plummet to the ground head first.
I mean, shouldn't happen, but
it shouldn't happen. No.
Yeah. And then there's the other thing that I often used actually, and it sometimes worked, sometimes it didn't work, but it's worth trying. And that is the pencil trick that works with plosives too. And I hope you mean the same thing that I mean now, Malcolm, because you added that too. Yeah. So it's just putting a pencil in front of the capsule, in front of the mic, like fixing it with a rubber band or something.
Yeah. Do you have a pencil handy? I would love to just try this out for the listener.
Unfortunately not.
See, I got a pen, but I'm on a condenser or on a dynamic, and it's more of a condenser thing, I feel like. But we could try it, see what happens. All right, so let's do a plosives first. Puh. That was no pencil. Puh. I don't know if it made a difference. All right, we'll try an S.
Maybe a little bit.
No pencil. Pencil. We'll see how that translates.
To me, the S sounded a little smoother indeed. Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
What we're doing, listener, is dispersing air, though. We're dispersing air from directly hitting our capsule, so our diaphragm.
Exactly.
That's kind of the idea here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. Simple as that. Put a pencil in front of the mic and see if it changes things. So yeah, the basic idea behind all of this is to avoid the direct airflow into the capsule, the diaphragm. And if you can pull that off, but still capture what's important, the essence of the sound, then you're good, I think. So these are the things you can do when it comes to placement and mic choice. Is there anything else we can think about when it comes to capturing stuff? I think these are really the main ones. Sometimes you get like a weird sort of bright stuff from room acoustics, but like that's a whole different kind of worms. But I think if you're, let's assume you're in a somewhat controlled space, and then it's typically just about what happens directly in front of the mic.
Well, I think maybe just the one thing worth mentioning is that the room acoustics that come off of S sounds are very high frequency and the easiest things to treat. You really shouldn't have this issue if you've even just hung blankets and the bare minimum stuff. Just get something up. This is like the kind of thing that egg cartons might actually help.
Yeah, maybe.
One thing, Yeah. So you shouldn't have this problem. There's no real excuse for having high fluttery stuff that high up.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, my light has changed. Didn't notice when it happened.
Oh yeah,
it's yellow and red. So whatever that is to you.
I can't really see the yellow, but I think that's just kind of the video stuff going on.
Yeah. Anyway, good. Next one is signal flow. I wrote it down here as signal flow and plugin order. What I mean by that is it's not about the actual processing yet, but it's about the order of things in your plugin chain. So now we have recorded, we are in the DAW. And to me, it makes a big difference whether I'm like EQing into a compressor or if I compress first and then EQ. So for example, on a lot of vocals, I will boost a bunch of top end when I want to make it more airy, when I want to make it more present, when I, the intelligibility and all of that. I want to add, oftentimes I just add top end to a vocal. And if I do that before a compressor, the compressor will then react to the now brighter signal. And when there is like loud, bright stuff happening, it will react to it and turn it down. It will do what a compressor does, but it will also hear the brighter stuff and it will react to that signal. If I EQ after the compressor and I boost, especially if I boost top end after the compressor will bring up S's usually anyways. And then if I EQ after that, I will just make those already like these S's that are now louder because of the compression, I will make those brighter. And to me, you just have to try it. To me, it sounds smoother to boost top end into a compressor than to boost top end after a compressor. That doesn't mean I don't ever do that. I often do it, and oftentimes it's not a problem. But sometimes when I feel like it sounded okay, and then after EQing and compression, it just got too sibilant, I try to boost top end into the compressor, and that often helps, really. So
yeah, I don't really have much to add here, but if you just think about what's happening, you can kind of predict what's going to happen after. Compression is the thing that tends to make these S's go crazy, I find. I'm personally usually trying to deal with it before the compressor, but it's totally common for me to end up having something later in the chain as well that's helping again. It's like DS, compress, DS.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, same here. I was just talking about the basic like EQ and compression order sort of. There's definitely a De-Esser in front of it most of the time. Yeah. Go ahead. Tell us about your De-Essing workflow.
Well, De-Essers, that's a whole thing because there's so many different De-Essers and they all do kind of sound different to me, which is interesting. That said, don't overthink it. You don't need to own 10 De-Essers. The stock one's probably going to do a great job. In fact, the stock Pro Tools De-Esser is my most used De-Esser, I think. Maybe. Possibly.
Interesting. I don't really like the Cubase one, but maybe I just have to learn a little better. But it's definitely doable with it too. So
yeah, maybe give it a shot. I mean, and then I know a lot of people own the Waves De-Esser as well, and that's a great one I think as well. We're huge Fab Filter fans on this podcast, and their De-Esser is great as well. But like those three cover everything for me as far as just reaching for a De-Esser standalone plugin where that's its whole job. It works. One of those is going to do the trick, and usually it's just kind of any of them really. It's only when it becomes like you got a tricky thing that I have to try and audition them a little bit. But like I said, I usually have one at the start of my chain just because I know that I'm going to be compressing things heavily usually. So it's like I'm kind of compensating for knowing that the S is going to get louder once I compress it. So the first stage is probably turning it down too much. If there wasn't a compressor later, it would kind of be neutering it. But the compressor brings it back up to where it should live. Yeah,
that makes sense. And if you have two De-Essers, one before and one after processing or like after EQ and compression, are those set to like this? Are those the same, or do you use different settings there?
It would be different settings, probably just a different like range, I guess. So like for how much reduction is happening when it's hit, and I just dial it in to taste really. Lately, though, I would say that I've got my first De-Esser and then my compressor, and that's kind of on all my vocal tracks. And then on the bus, I have some kind of De-Esser going that is just de-essing the vocal group actually. And I've had good results with that, and it's less tweaky for me. But I'll get into what that De-Esser plugin is because it's not usually an actual De-Esser plugin a little bit later in our outline here.
Okay, good. Okay,
yeah, cool. How about you?
I love the good old R De-Esser, Renaissance De-Esser.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's
thing.
Totally great one. Yeah.
I just love that still. I have tried a bunch of others, but that's the one that I keep coming back to. And I use two of the two, one in the beginning of the chain and one somewhere at the end. And the first one typically for me is a broadband De-Esser where with the De-Esser you set, there's at least with this De-Esser, but with many of them, you set the frequency range that the De-Esser should listen to, like where it detects the S's. So that's one parameter. That's not what you hear, but you set a certain frequency range where the S's are, and then the De-Esser reacts to that. And then the other thing that you have control over is what it actually reduces once it's detected an S.
Yeah.
And with the Renaissance one, what I do is the first one is a broadband De-Esser. So I set the range, the detection range, and then I set it to whenever you hear an S, you turn down the whole signal, like a fader going down quickly and back up again whenever an S happens. That's the first one that I do. That's very transparent because it's like just turning down the S's manually. You just have to set the timing and stuff correctly or like whatever you have control over. But that's what I do first. And then the other one at the end, that's where I have dialed in my sound that I want so much that I don't want to affect or like everything and like everything's like so dialed in. For whatever reason I don't like the broadband thing anymore.
Yeah.
But sometimes the S's just got too loud, and then I end up using a second instance where it only controls the top end, almost like the upper band of a multiband compressor or something.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. The first one broadband, transparent. The second one just affecting and it's usually a shelf. It's like upwards of 5K or something.
Yes, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because that is important. Yeah, the like broadband versus kind of it's multiband, but really you're choosing one band, a single band, specific frequency allocation. That. I actually I'm usually using just a high shelf for my first one, but not always. Yeah, it's kind of, maybe I'll play with that. You're convincing me to look at that again in my workflow. But as long as the S's are getting turned down, right? Whatever sounds natural.
Exactly. For whatever reason, I rarely use a narrow band. Like when the detection band is narrow, but like the actual thing that's being turned down is very rarely just a narrow band. It's almost always a shelf. It's like upwards of a certain frequency and then all of it. Because some people go in and like find the most annoying frequency and just turn that down. But that always, I don't know, that just doesn't work for me most of the time. It always changes the sound so much. It's not transparent enough for me. It gives people a lisp, or I don't know.
It doesn't work for me either. It's either a shelf or the whole thing. You're right. Don't really know why that is, but that is the way it is. I do think we should talk about the inner workings of a De-Esser a little bit, because I think that will be valuable for our listeners. You already mentioned that there's the detection circuit, and then kind of the what you're actually affecting, setting that range as well. Some of them have a listen feature, which is extremely useful, especially if you are on one of those tricky voices where it's hard to make this S do what you want to do. And you can then listen to the detection circuit, essentially. So you click on listen, and it starts playing what it's listening to, what it uses to search for an S, and then you can kind of scroll around and find the frequency that person's consonants live at, where their S's jump out. I find like 6K is kind of usually the default, but some people definitely 4K, some people a little higher. Like you can find where their S's really jump out, and then this is going to make it easier to control the dynamics of it, because it's going to only be the S's that are really triggering your De-Esser to go off. Super handy. Plus, doing that can help you also kind of figure out what to EQ if you want to go after it with like a kind of normal EQ or something like that. It just kind of tells you learn more about their voice by listening to it that way, I think.
100% agreed. Yeah.
There could be speed and release of the S and stuff like that as well. But generally, De-Essers kind of don't give you those parameters, which is good. I think it's best not to be too tweaky on it.
Yeah, totally. And then there are some special De-Essers where, like, I love actually, that's the one I use on the vocal bus. Like you mentioned, you de-ess the vocal bus. I do that too. And on there, I use it's called Sibilance by Waves. Typically, I'm not the biggest Waves plugins fan for various reasons, but like in this case, like with De-Essers,
that's the one I meant when I mentioned the Waves De-Esser. That's the one I was talking about, Waves Sibilance.
Okay. And the Sibilance one, I don't know exactly what's going on under the hood, but they say it's like the resynthesis, whatever. So they detect the S's and they do whatever with it. You read it up. It's like not a normal De-Esser. It does something with the S's. Recreates them in some way or whatever. That one seems to be really transparent. I can do a lot of de-essing with it, and it still sounds transparent. So there might be certain tools that have a different kind of feature set or controls, or like what's the one called, the Slate one, the Aosis.
Oh yeah,
you know that one
DS
that has
sort
of it comes with the Slate bundle. That one has a smoothing knob, whatever that does, and some sort of, like, I think it's some sort of saturation. We'll get to why that could help with S's. So there are some De-Essers with extra options, but the typical ones give you the detection. Then you can control, you can control what it hears. You can control what it turns down and how much of it, and then maybe the speed of it. But yeah, it's mostly frequency, threshold, and that's it.
And range, yeah. Yeah, okay. So then
good.
Up next on our list was EQs. And now the Fab Filter Pro Q is the EQ we mentioned almost every episode, I feel like. That has a dynamic EQ built into it. So there's two parts to this. You can just carve out the frequency that is SE, but you might not want that when it's not an S sound, right? You're just kind of dulling the whole vocal then. So then if you go to a dynamic EQ that only jumps down on those loud S noises, you've essentially created a De-Esser at that point. This totally works. I just find that a De-Esser plugin is a quicker way of doing it. I don't know about you, Benny.
Me too.
The only time I would say that I like to use an EQ is if I am finding a compressor is really igniting a certain frequency in an S. Carving it out just a little bit right before the compressor can be a quick way to just get that done. It's like if the plugin's already open, I'll just chew it out.
Yeah, same for me. And there's only two situations where I use a static EQ band. And that is when it's actually not just the S's, but it's a resonance that's just there in the vocal. Sometimes there's some harsh frequency, similar to like a guitar cab resonance where it just whistles or is like harsh and annoying.
Yep.
And that also causes the S's to be sharp and all that. And in that case, I just detect that sort of resonance and turn it down and leave it there. So that's the one instance where it's like a notch, a very narrow band that I would just take out. And then the other situation is sometimes, and that depends on the mic, sometimes also the room, or mostly that. Sometimes also the voice. It's when just a broader part of the spectrum, for whatever reason, is just too harsh or too forward or something. It's oftentimes in the upper mid-range, and it's not really a resonance or something like that, but it's like overall too much. And I can just turn that down and with a bell, and that will oftentimes solves the S's too. So you gotta know if it's really a sibilance, like an S thing, an S problem that you have, or if it's just generally there in the recording, and then you can use a basic EQ. But be very careful with like just addressing the S's with EQ, unless it's a dynamic one, because as you said, Malcolm, you don't want to sort of punch holes into your vocal all the time. You just want to do it to the S's if those are the problem.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame to make the whole vocal dull just to get around S's, yeah.
Yeah.
Multiband compression is like another kind of form of the same thing really here. That's what I like to use when it's a broad thing where the vocal overall is a little bright, and that makes the S's kind of jump out extra, where I can just kind of tame the top end as a broad bell or shelf with a dynamic comp. Not something I do very often, though. I feel like I'm always going to warn whenever it's dynamic anything or multiband anything, just because people think it's the magic bullet, as we've talked about before.
Yeah.
It sounds so convenient, but it's really not something I find myself doing that often.
No. Multiband compressors sometimes give you the option of like doing sidechaining things or stuff like that. And in those cases, I might use it. But for standard De-Essing, there's better tools or like other tools. It's the same thing. Honestly, it's almost the same thing. So the upper band of a multiband, depending on which comp you use. But with the FabFilter one, you can also set the internal sidechain filter to detect certain frequencies, and then you can choose the band that will get turned down. It's very similar to a De-Esser.
Yeah, it's very similar. It's almost more tweaky, which if you really need it is great, because you do have attack and release times, and you have that really detailed listen circuit, and there is a lot of power there, but that's if you're spending that much time on de-essing the vocal, it's going to be a rough mix ahead.
Yeah, exactly. All right. The next one is interesting, though, and that's one I've been using more and more recently, and that's saturation, where, I've always used saturation, and I love distorting things, but specifically to make things sound smoother, saturation and even distortion is a great tool, especially for when it comes to taming sibilance and harsh stuff. I love using saturation more and more. It's just an amazing tool, even distortion sometimes. And the way I always explain it, and I don't know if that is, it's probably not correct, but I think it helps get the concept. So the way I think of it is, when something is harsh to me or like sticking out or sibilant, it's usually a pretty narrow part of the frequency spectrum that just sticks out, that's piercing. And when I saturate a broader part of the frequency spectrum around that annoying frequency, or if I saturate the whole thing, then the saturation sort of fills in the gaps between these peaks. It shaves off the top a little bit, and it adds harmonic content in between, which sort of makes those harsh resonances not stick out as much. So if you think about white noise, where like every frequency is essentially the same volume, you get closer and closer to that the more you saturate things, because you bring up all the content in between those narrow frequencies that stick out. So to me, that's how I think of it when I think of saturation, to make things sound smoother. It just takes the edge off, it fills in the gaps in between the harsh stuff. And just what it sounds like to me is just, it sounds less edgy in a way. And it might be counterintuitive, because we think of saturation and distortion oftentimes as something aggressive when you think of distorted guitars or distorting anything really. But if you do it intentionally, and if you do it carefully, if you do it to just maybe parts of the signal, or there's ways to make saturation sound really smooth. And that's also what a lot of people refer to as a warm or pleasing sound when they talk about analog stuff or tape or tubes and that sort of thing. So I think saturation can sound really smooth, take the edge off something. And oftentimes when I saturate a vocal a lot, in the tracking, for example, I find myself not having to de-ess much. And if it's a really clean vocal, especially with a cheap mic, just into the built-in preamp or something, that's where I have to do the most work to make the S's work, sort of. But when it's like saturated, it's got some mojo already, and it's like it's smoother in a way. It's harmonically rich, and I don't have to do as much to it, I feel like.
A warm vocal isn't probably going to have jumpy S's, so it kind of works out that way. But not every mix needs a warm, saturated vocal, so this isn't a magic bullet either. It's
no.
It's kind of, you get lucky if that's the case it goes.
That's why I'm very careful with the saturation recommendations and stuff, or like with using terms like warm and things. But it still is true that we just like the way certain tools sound. And I'm not saying you can't do that in the DAW. You absolutely can. There's emulations of all that stuff. But a very accurate digital representation of something is going to give you all the accurate, like, annoying stuff too. And if you just shave off the top a little bit and saturate it a little bit, and you do some quote unquote analog mojo to it, even if it's just emulations, then that just sounds smoother to me. But it's not what I need every single time.
Right.
Yeah, but just play around with that. It's an interesting concept. It's also something that I love, for example, on if you have an acoustic guitar that just sounds hard and harsh, or if somebody just recorded it without mics, just the DI or something, saturating it just makes it sound a little rounder, softer, or whatever. And that's a similar difference in feel that I get when I do it to a vocal. So just experiment with it and see how you like it and if it helps you with the S's. But it is definitely a tool.
Yeah,
for that.
Absolutely. Now, the next thing is manual de-essing, which if you've ever spent any time editing a podcast or looking at recorded dialogue at all, you can actually see an S. It's really easy to identify an S just looking at a waveform of a voice. And you can quite literally just write in volume automation to turn that S down, or just clip gain that part of the file further down. And that will make the S more quiet. So it's really that simple. This is a time-consuming way of doing things, but also, you can get it just how you want as well. Worth mentioning, if you're using clip gain, that is still going to run into all of your processing after that. So, that's going to turn it down, but it's still going to hit a compressor after that, which might make it loud again, which could be great, but it's just, you need to remember that it's not staying that way. Where volume automation is usually post effects and is going to kind of yield a final result. But even then, you still have bus compressors and limiters going on, so that changes things too. You might have to revisit all of your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to say, though, as tedious as it is, I love manual de-essing, despite all the tools that we have. That doesn't mean I do it all the time, not at all. But sometimes I do the usual things first, but sometimes there's just the occasional S that just is too loud or sounds weird or gets a lisp or whatever. And in those cases, I absolutely go in and just clip gain the one S down. Or what I also do is sometimes there's one S that just doesn't sound right no matter what I do, that every other S sounds great, but that one thing sounds like a lisp or something. In that case, I just cut it out and copy a different S from somewhere else in the song in there instead of it. And it works perfectly well. If you do it right and you zoom in enough and you find one that's like similar, ideally the same word somewhere else in the song or something, you can absolutely do that. And I've saved myself a lot of time tweaking things by just removing it all together and replacing it with a different S, and it works perfectly.
Yeah, that's totally great tip, actually. Just grabbing a normal sounding S and swapping it in. You can totally do that. At a certain point in the mix, I think I'm more prone to just volume automate an S down as well, like rather than tweaking the de-esser anymore. If it's working for, most of the S's, I'm not going to keep messing with it. It's just grab the offending one and turn that down.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, as you said, it's important. There, you can do it with clip gain at the beginning or with volume automation after the chain. That's worth mentioning for sure. Yeah, cool. The next one is also one that I haven't used for a long time until I discovered it, and now I love it, which is using transient tools to deal with S's. So sort of transient designers. I love a particular one, which is Spiff by Oak Sound. It's mentioned in a different, you could also say that's one of those intelligent tools and things that we get to later, but it is a transient designer, a multiband transient designer that sort of detects transients and then turns them down or boosts them. And I find that sometimes it's not the whole S that's offending or that's a problem, but it's like when it's very percussive or just the beginning of it when it sounds really hard. So sometimes just making it sound less percussive makes it sound smoother and is all the de-essing that I need. And so, yeah, I find that especially multiband transient tools are actually a pretty cool thing and help a lot with it. And the spiff especially is totally cool on vocals. I just use the very upper part of it. I ignore the rest. And I set it to cut instead of boost, of course, then in this case. And then you can monitor the delta. So, the thing that...
Essentially what you'd be removing.
Yeah, exactly what you'll be removing, the difference between the unaffected and the affected signal. And then you hear, what you will hear then is that it's part of the S's, the T's, but also mouth noises, clicks, things it's almost like a declick thing that I really like. You can absolutely overdo it and you have to be very careful with it. But sometimes that really is better to me than turning down all of the S, basically.
Yeah, that's fascinating because it totally can be just the shape of the S that's the problem. And if it's like a hard consonant attack on an S, it's like, oh, it doesn't sound normal, right? So you could shape it a little bit. I like that idea. I'm gonna definitely experiment with that. Good idea.
And there's another great tool, by the way, that I just have tried a little bit. I haven't bought it, but I've tried it a little bit, and I found it fascinating. And I don't know if you've tried it. There's I think it's called Split EQ by Eventide.
I haven't. No.
Do you know of that?
I do. Yeah, I've definitely seen it floating around, but I haven't given it a go yet.
So the concept is very interesting. It's not really cheap, but I find the concept to be very fascinating. It's an EQ, but you can choose whether you want to EQ the whole thing, the whole signal, just like with a fab filter or something, or if the EQ changes only apply to the transients or only apply to the sustain. So you can boost and cut, but you can say that high shelf, I will just EQ the sustain portion of my signal and leave the transients alone. Or I will reduce only the transients. And, so you could add air to a vocal, for example, without making the transients harsh. And, or you can cut harshness without making the whole vocal dull because you can only affect the transients, for example. So that is really, really interesting. And it's a mix of EQ and like a transient tool.
I didn't know much about it, and now I know more.
Thanks, it's really cool. It's just that's why it's called split EQ. It's just the only difference to a normal EQ is that you can split it up into transient and sustain more or less, and you can apply EQ moves to either or to both.
Very cool.
I've never had a success with just a standard transient designer, or at least No, it's mostly the multiband transient tools that work for me.
I would think it would almost have to be, otherwise it would be messing with things pretty hard. But that's a really cool line of thought to experiment with. I'm going to have to dig into that some more.
Okay, and then the next one, I'm pretty sure you have experimented with that though. The sort of repair tools, which is it's actually one category, I'd say. It's like all the intelligent, automatic sort of tools, and in that category are things like RX isotope, where you have or any sort of spectral editor that sort of gives you control over very deep, very like granular control over the frequency spectrum, and you can detect what exactly is the harsh sound, and you can basically delete it out of your signal. And or you can do an automatic like D-click, D whatever thing with the RX modules. So that is definitely a thing that a lot of post-production folks use, like also in film and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. There's RX, which is overkill for anything musical. Really.
Yeah, it's a fascinating tool. It's like so powerful and awesome, but for standard de-essing, it's not what I would reach for. But
I do think like if you're a pro mixer, like you professionally mix music, it's totally worth having. The amount of time I've removed click tracks and weird noises from stuff is totally invaluable. But for a recording musician, it's not something that you need to own probably at all. But the other side of this, where the other automatic tools you're talking about, like Soothe or Spiff, we already mentioned, Gullfoss being another one. These are like intelligent auto tools as well. Auto in a sense, in that they definitely are making decisions on their own, but you are still kind of selecting the parameters in which you want them to be allowed to work in. These can be fantastic, actually. Soothe, funny enough, is probably my least favorite de-esser, although it has been the perfect tool for the job on more than one occasion, I'm sure. Spiff, I haven't tried, but I'm very curious to after you said that you like that. But Gullfoss, that's like my all-time favorite for de-essing. It's so fantastic, I think. And that's the one I like to use on my vocal bus as kind of like a bus vocal de-esser. It's working on more than just the S's, but it really reacts to the S's. And it's kind of like a top-end tamer and glue machine for me, because it's kind of giving like a uniform, more static result there. But it really jumps in when the S's come in, and I find it just cleans it up really transparently for me. And it's so simple. It's like a couple clicks and I'm happy. So yeah, these are cool tools as well. For me, they're really less specific than like a de-esser is, but they're also just really fantastic and sound great.
Yeah, I have to agree about the Soothe part. As amazing as Soothe is, I don't use it as my only de-esser, but I like to use it in combination. So the combination of Soothe and Spiff is like the perfect one for me. It's similar to what you described with Gullfoss, because Soothe alone is more of a, how do I say that? It gets rid of like the more sustained stuff. Even if you set it very fast, it's like when the vocal is getting harsh, when they sing higher notes or something, or when there is like a resonance happening, that's where it's really cool. But it doesn't really address the super quick, hard sounding S's very well. And in combination with Spiff, it's like perfect because Spiff gives me the control over the transients and the clicks and all that. And Soothe gives me more of a control over longer S's and other annoying stuff in the vocal. And both together give me the smoothness that I want, which is probably what you just do with Gullfoss. And I have to look into Gullfoss more because I haven't really used it a lot, but everybody just tells me how amazing it is.
Yeah, I really do like it. Yeah, they're all fantastic. I mean, I use Soothe all the time. It's one of my favorite plugins ever, for sure. It's just for the S job specifically that I'm not usually reaching it. It's probably on my vocal, though, just not for that job.
And you could definitely make it work. So I know a lot of people who swear by it as their De-Esser. So it's just the way we use it and
totally.
as often.
Absolutely. It's also a very CPU-heavy De-Esser.
Oh, yeah. Totally. By the way, I don't know if you have the same experience, but since I've switched to the M1 MacBook, I find myself having Soothe on
way too much.
like ultra and like max oversampling and everything, and I can use like 10 instances of that, and like
I abuse
which
it.
is not necessary at all, but but it just can't handle it. So
why not?
Totally.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm using it like crazy.
Yeah.
So there's so many tools. Like that's a deep dive. That's probably the deepest dive anybody's ever done into De-Essing. Like we could have just told you about a De-Esser and you probably would have had the tools you need to get most jobs done. But it's fun digging in and kind of showing other ways to get the job done. And, the last thing I would like to touch on that isn't on our outline here is, have you ever used a hardware De-Esser on the way in?
No, I haven't actually. I've done other things to make it smoother on the way in, like I said, with saturation and stuff, but not a real hardware De-Esser.
Pencil trick, off axis, that's the stuff you should be thinking about. But yeah, there are actual, hardware De-Essers. I used the DBX De-Esser for a session and I absolutely loved it. Really thought about buying them. I thought they sounded so good.
Yeah.
But
I've heard them; they sound great. And there's an emulation by Plugin Alliance now of them, I think.
Yeah. It was fantastic, but it's not necessary.
No,
there's better things to invest money in.
Yeah, I gotta add something there. I have actually used one, but that one I wouldn't recommend. And before people go and buy some cheap thing, I had, when I started like 15 years ago, so I had one of these cheap compressor limited De-Esser channel strip things that people use in live sound sometimes, but one of the really cheap ones where it had 2 channels of compression, a limiter at the end, and the De-Esser somewhere in the chain. Yep. And it was like $150 or so for those 2 channels. And I used that back then because I just wanted to learn compression and I thought I had to use analog stuff. Anyway, that De-Esser and like all of it just isn't worth it. It sounds terrible. And so before you go out and buy some like the cheapest hardware thing with the De-Esser built into it, don't do it. Like focus on mic placement and then all the other things that we mentioned.
Yeah, the only reason I was using them at all was that I was heavily compressing on the way in. I had like 2 distressors and a fatso going. Like it was a really, really processed things. And the De-Esser made that possible, right? I had 2 De-Essers in the chain, I think. It was like a super intense chain. But like that's not usual, even for me. Like I love crushing on the way in. That's still way more than a usual vocal chain. So yeah, don't worry about that. Just wanted to mention that they exist.
Absolutely. And by the way, because you mentioned like the compression on the way in, my distressor actually does both for me. That's what I love so much about the distressor. When I was still recording a lot, I compressed the shit out of things with this, but I used the high pass filter on the detector in combination with the upper mid-range boost that it has. So the detector would listen to less low end and more of the upper mid-range, and that would cause the distressor to react more to the harsh sibilant stuff. And if I did that, I could compress like 10, 12 dB, especially in the opto mode, and it would give me a very smooth sounding compression that at the same time also almost acted like a De-Esser. That's what I loved about the distressor, by the way. Yeah. And that's the one thing that the software emulations kind of do, but not exactly like the hardware does. Not like really. It's one thing that I really miss about I have it here, but I don't use it as often in the mix right now. And that's one thing that it does so super well.
Yeah.
That being said, you can experiment with that too with plugins. Like if you have a sidechain EQ, that's sort of advanced stuff now. But if you have a compressor with a sidechain that you can tweak, you can try avoiding some of the low end and boosting some of the top end in the sidechain so that the compressor will compress more if there's more harsh stuff going on.
Yeah.
So
totally valid to bring up. Yeah. How you compress and how you process your vocal also influences the S's. It's not like, I think that's really important. De-Essing isn't actually the only way we're dealing with S's while we mix vocals. No. That's just a part of it. That's like the specialized part of it, but everything else affects it too. You know, if we're cranking up the brightness on our vocal with an EQ, that's going to affect our S's huge. So you got to be careful doing that. And you know, that might dictate if it's a shelf, a bell, or a tilt. You know, like those are going to yield different results in that S situation for sure.
100%. Yeah, all right. I think that's enough.
That's tons. That's tons. That is, the deepest dive into de-essing. Almost an hour worth of de-essing. That is not our intention. We thought this was going to be so quick.
Yeah, totally. But just know that if there's one takeaway, just know that keeping the sibilance in check is really important, and controlling that is really, really important. And just after listening to this episode, if you from now on just pay attention to that more and really think about how you can make that smoother while still having the air and the brightness you want, then was already worth it.
Totally.
Cool.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next week.
Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.